Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Well, it should come to the surprise of absolutely no one, but there seems to be some tomfoolery afoot with Mahmoud Charr and Trevor Bryan, this supposed fight that's going to be happening at the end of January. So Charr has taken the step to apparently leak correspondence with boxingscene.com, which we'll go to, and then on to a few thoughts. And obviously we've got history with all this. There was meant to be a fight a year ago, and Charr claimed he didn't get the requisite documents to allow him to get a visa to enter the United States to face Bryan then. What happened at that time? He was binned off from being the WBA regular champion, made a champion in recess. Trevor Bryan goes on to fight Berman Stavern, who was a Don King fighter, and he becomes the WBA regular champion. To that point, he'd been the interim champion. So fast forward a year, and the WBA had put in some measures to try to prevent this happening again. It put a 25% deposit. You have to have this on the line and given a date for things to happen. But apparently, according to Charr, it is not happening. So the story reads, despite the threat of a hard deadline in place, Boxing Scene has learned that Don King has yet to deliver final contracts for the WBA World Heavyweight title fight between Bryan and Charr. The Hall of Fame promoter secured the rights to the rescheduled bout after submitting an offer of $1,101.90 during a December 9 purse bid hearing held by the WBA, which required a 25% deposit on the spot, along with signed contracts by December 29. So it continues, the latter has yet to happen, and Charr, who was in this exact position a year ago, refuses to allow history to repeat. The veteran heavyweight contender has personally called WBA President Gilberto Jesus Mendoza to task, threatening not only to take further legal action, but to encourage others to turn their backs on the Panama City headquartered sanctioning body. So some of this reads, Mendoza, they forced me to walk a dirty path. I will sue the corrupt club. And Charr said this to Mendoza in the presence of several other WBA executives in a strongly worded email, a copy of which has been obtained by boxingscene.com, which really means translated, it's provided to them. I recorded our video call where you promised to protect me. You lied. Your father is ashamed that you are his son. You are not worthy to be a president for such an association. So Charr probably not doing himself any favors with that. So the story is some backstory about previous bits and pieces associated with this whole drama. So he goes on to talk about some of the conditions that are holding him up. So he says, they do not understand that as a Syrian citizen, I have already been to the United States several times with a B1, B2 visa. Charr pointed out in refusing to accept the degree of difficulty in DKP, that's Don King Productions or Promotions, resolving the issue, which is the company's responsibility as the lead promoter. Charr says, today I'm a German citizen and I would be able to easily enter the USA with an ESTA visa. But without a signed fight contract from Don King, you don't get a P1 visa, and so I am not allowed to fight. He goes on to say, I advise him to think carefully about which way to go, the honest way or the dirty way of Don King. Your word was for your dead father and you didn't keep it. I'll also make a press release that the WBA should be boycotted, and I'll post it on my social media if you don't see your censors. No athlete or employed worker comes to the US without a signed employment contract. I'm fed up with the WBA. You are no longer a worthy club if you take my title away from me. So this, who could have seen this coming? I think absolutely everyone, because the WBA and Trevor Bryan and Don King and Mahmoud Charr, this fight they've tried to make this a number of times. And I know Trevor Bryan has said on social media that Mahmoud Charr is to blame for all of this, the fight not happening multiple times in recent years. But he's got to take a little bit of a look closer to home. Mahmoud Charr is clearly going public here to get his situation, his plight, a bit of attention, to say, look, I don't want this to happen to me again. But Charr also has to wear a little bit of this as well, because ahead of the purse bid, I said, look, if you want to avoid the shenanigans, you and your backers need to put in the winning bid. Then you can control the promotion. They did not, so Mahmoud Charr lets history repeat. He is at the whim of Don King Productions, Don King himself, his lackeys, all that sort of stuff. So you can only sort of cry foul so much because all this happened a year ago. What protections did you put in place since then to try to resolve this? What have you been doing to agitate in the meantime? And obviously this is one effort, but it seems to be a little bit too late. But if the contract was meant to be signed, sealed and delivered by December 29th, and it hasn't been, and Charr needs that to get the requisite visa, well, the WBA needs to step in my view. They need to actually, besides just putting in conditions in the purse bid like a 25% deposit, etc., and saying this is when things need to happen, they need to follow through here, because if this gets called off again, it will be an absolute joke. It's already been a joke. I mean, it's a joke that these guys were fighting for titles to begin with. Stepping back to 2017, it was fight week for Charr and Ustinov. A regular title did not need to be on the line. It was put on the line. Charr wins it, doesn't fight for years. Fast forward about a year, the WBA claims there's some legal issues with Charr and Fresakendo at the time, and then gets a interim title on for BJ Flores and Trevor Bryan. So the WBA's created all this mess. They've put these sort of players and actors on the stage here, and this has all been going sideways ever since. So the WBA need to shoulder the blame, but they need to actually clean up their mess at the same time. Because if it ends up being another bait and switch, it's going to be a laughing stock, even more so than it is at the moment. And you can already see, and I believe there's an opponent lined up as the plan B. See here on screen. So the WBA Top 15 issued 1st of December. Look down at number 13, Jonathan Goudry. So this is another out-of-the-blue inclusion, which would suggest it's a bought and paid-for ranking, and it's come at a time where there's uncertainty. Well, this updated December the 1st was before Charr went public with his misgivings about what's happening with the visa issue, that he's got no contract, he can't get into the United States to fight. So Jonathan Goudry, you might be going, who is that? And it's a good question, because I would say 99% of people have either never heard of him, never seen him fight, and let's go to his box rec here. So he's a 32-year-old American who goes by The King, 5'11", a record of 17 wins, 2 draws, and that does sort of shape as an opponent someone would bring in to look like they've got a veneer of credibility with the record and the resume. But when you look at the record, it's very Trevor Bryan-esque. So the last guy he fought was a guy with 19 losses on his resume. Prior to that, a guy with 9 losses, 11 losses, 6 losses, 11 losses. It looks like Trevor Bryan's record prior to his so-called title fights. So if this ends up being the plan B, if Charr is binned off again and it doesn't happen, it's a disgrace. And actually, Trevor Bryan ends up looking like a clown along with Don King, because it is such a gift and a manufactured so-called title fight if this guy ends up facing Trevor Bryan. It's not 100% certain that that's going to happen, of course. Charr is clearly trying to agitate and trying to get issues resolved so he can get into the United States. But Charr and Bryan is a much more competitive fight than Bryan versus this guy who's unknown, unheralded, and has basically just got a whole bunch of journeymen on his resume and does not deserve a title fight if, in fact, he is the guy that they're lining up. But the timing is very convenient, isn't it? A random guy comes into the rankings out of nowhere at a time where there's uncertainty about the Trevor Bryan and Mahmoud Charr fight. And we've seen it before as well. And what's the bet? That he's got some sort of tie-in with Don King? We shall see. But and Trevor Bryan himself, or should I say Mahmoud Charr, besides the boxing scene stuff, nothing really on his social media. He's put this out a number of hours ago before I recorded this, saying, I love the business of business. I love the risk raking. Maybe he means taking, and then he does his typical hashtag Vonderstraße Süden Sternen, which is something to the stars, or, his sort of thing. But entirely predictable that Mahmoud Charr would be in this situation. Entirely predictable that Don King would delay and Don King wouldn't do what he was meant to do, as we've seen a year ago. Literally, it's deja vu, and not the good kind either. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.